Right, guys, we should have started it on the YouTube channel. So I'm just trying to call that up to check that's working okay. Yep, and that seems to be good. Right, fine. So we have everything working on 3 different items. That's not bad. I think that's a record for us. Not quite as bad as when we had to just set up a mobile phone recording a laptop screen, but you know, each time's an improvement. Great. So let's see who we've got on so far. We've got Katrin, we've got Janet in Canada, Bianca and Sarah. Great. Janet, can you hear and see us okay? Thank you very much for joining us, if you can hear us. Janet is actually one of the co-authors for the paper and saw our message on Twitter and decided to agreed very kindly to join the meeting this evening from Ontario. So that's incredibly exciting. Thanks for that. I'm going to turn myself around now so you can see we've got colleagues in the room as well. There we go. Lovely. And what we'll do is I'll come around here and you can still hear us if we're talking around here? Yeah. Perfect. Great. So we've got about 5 minutes, I think, before people are expecting us to start formally. Just waiting on our speakers. So that's good. If everyone's happy, just before we start the actual presentation, I'll just mention 5 minutes before the presentation, when people join, about our conference that's coming up, and about some of the things we're doing at the moment in GASOC. So I'll mention to you guys beforehand, our conference we've got for the 14th of September is going to be technology in global surgery, ironically. And we're going to be looking at how sub-consultant levels can get involved, what's out there already. We've got a couple of speakers confirmed. Nepogodiev, I don't know if you guys know him. He's done a lot of work in India on ground level and practical innovations. He's a professor there. We've got Professor Jane, who's a member of the Leeds MedTech group, who's going to be presenting. And then we're also going to be running in the afternoon a hackathon where we'll give attendees a question and they will be given time to come up with solutions mediated by members of our group, and then they'll hopefully go on to, the best ones will hopefully go on to present to the Royal Colleges. The Royal College of Anaesthetists has agreed to carry any anaesthetic ideas through, present them to their web team and look at funding and support for that. And we're in talks with the Royal College of Surgeons and Obs as well about getting it. It should be quite good. It will be in Leeds. So it's a really upcoming centre. And we're going to start at 10, so it gives people a chance to travel there on the day instead of having to stay over. So it should be quite good. Yeah, 14th September. So it should be quite interesting. We've also got another journal club coming up next month in June, on the 27th, I think, when another one of our colleagues will be, who's just had another Lancet article published on mortality, maternal mortality rather, and she's going to be presenting that on the 27th of June, so that should be quite interesting too. Depending on how well this goes for people joining on Blue Jeans, we may offer it as a physical site, again like this, physical and tech combined, or if people prefer it online, we may offer it online only. It's always nice to be able to come to something with people and have that opportunity to discuss, I think. Good. I'll just send a wee message to our speakers. Has anyone else got anything going on in their areas, global surgery related, any other events or anything like that going on that they wanted to share about? You guys know of anything that's going on in London at the moment? They're not doing GSF this year, are they? The Global Surgical Frontiers. So yeah. So I don't think that's happening this year. Have you guys seen anything up in Glasgow?
No, I don't think I can think of anything that's coming up at the moment that's directly global surgery related.
Oh, I see Dmitri's there. Hi, Dmitri. Thanks for joining. Can you hear us and see us okay? I think I might have muted you. There we go. Can you hear us? Can you hear us and see us okay, Dmitri?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Are you? We've not started the formal. The formal meeting will start at 8, so it's just links between the centres at the moment. Other people should start logging in from 8. So are you all set up and good to go? Are you going to present, or are you and Aneel going to present together?
I think Aneel was going to just say a few words to introduce, and then I've got some slides I was going to hopefully show to you.
Perfect. Sounds great. Like I say, we advertised it formally starting at 8 online, so people will probably only start joining after that. What I'll do when you, Aneel, and you start presenting, I'll put everyone else on mute because I have the power to mute all, which is very exciting.
Yes.
But we'll do that once you guys have joined up. I just realised I can move this because it's not connected. Oh, maybe it's better further away actually. Can't really see us all. I'll need to nip up to the laptop, so actually maybe we're better where we are. Good. Oh, hi Aneel. Hi, thanks for joining us. I don't know if you saw, but actually we've got Janet Martin, your colleague, contacted me after we posted some of the things online and said could she join us as well. So we're very, very pleased to have a third author present this evening.
Hi Janet, are you okay?
Haven't actually been able to hear anything from Janet yet. She's up as in the meeting, but she's on mute and her camera's off, so I suspect she's waiting till 8 o'clock to join like everyone else. There you go. Good, fantastic. We were just saying, I know Dmitri said you're going to do a bit of an introduction, Aneel, and then we'll start a presentation with Dmitri. I'll just say a few words when people have started joining after 8. I'll just say a few words about our upcoming conference, if that's all right.
No problem. That's fine.
Yeah, I think people are starting to join now. While we were waiting, we were just asking because GSF, Global Surgical Frontiers, isn't happening this year, I don't think. So we were just asking if anyone else knew of any other events that were going on in the UK for global surgery. Have you heard of any?
I'm trying to think. I've heard of something, but it might not be what you're envisaging, which I think is a sort of flagship global surgery event for the UK.
No, just anything really, because usually there's Global Surgical Frontiers and then the colleges do a few things. But I know the Royal College of Anaesthetists did something already this year, but nothing else is really cropping up.
If there is not, I would strongly encourage you to organise one.
Well, funnily enough,
I was at the NIHR Global Health, Surgery Global Health Research Groups met yesterday.
Okay.
And the shared learning. So I sat next to someone who's doing sepsis in Uganda and someone who's doing stillbirth somewhere. And although these are really related topics, the joint learning is phenomenal. So if there's not an event in 2019, I strongly recommend that hopefully as a group there's capacity to organise something.
Well, we're doing a global medtech conference in September. So that I should have led with that. That's what I was going to mention when people started to join on us a bit more, which I think we've got happening now. we've organised a conference for September the 14th up in Leeds, looking at specifically the role of technology in global health.
Yeah, maybe that's the one I was just thinking about earlier.
Oh, brilliant! It's got out there.
But I'll leave it. It can be an ongoing conversation.
Yeah,
but I think it's worth thinking about.
And the only other thing that there is, it's kind of a massive jump up, but the Oxford University group are doing the 9th to the 13th of September, just before us actually. They're doing a week, but it's a credit-bearing short course. So it's actually designed for those credits to count towards a master's at some point in the future. So it's not really a kind of, a conference day or event. It's quite a big course, but it's pretty good value. I think it's £1,000 for the course. But it's like I say, if you choose to go on to do a master's or similar in the future, it's credit bearing, and they've got some pretty good speakers. So I would suggest having a look at that one. I can post some details about it. Well, there's actually some stuff on our Twitter account, but those are the only things I've heard of. But it's always good to hear about other people's events that one can go along to. I think as we're after 8, we'll just get going, if that's all right with you guys. I'll just see who we've got on the meeting. Very good. Okay. So welcome everyone, and all of our group on YouTube as well who've joined us. This is a GASOC Journal Club research meeting. We try to hold them every couple of months. It's an opportunity for people to meet colleagues who have a similar interest in global surgery, an opportunity for free discussion, and most importantly, an opportunity to empower and engage people. So it's not a competitive environment. It's a welcoming environment, and we hope that everyone from every level feels that they can join in the discussion. This evening we're very excited because we've got 2 authors of the recent Lancet paper looking at the global burden of postoperative death who are going to be speaking for us. And then afterwards we'll have a discussion. I'm going to mute everyone while they are speaking, just so we don't get any background noise. Anyone from any of the sites who's got questions, we'll get them to ask those questions first. Afterwards, we'll have any questions from anyone else who's joining us as an individual. Just a brief word, we've got our GASOC's got its Global MedTech Conference coming up on the 14th of September this year. We'll have some international speakers in the morning, and then in the afternoon we'll have a hackathon where people will get to discuss solutions using technology for a global health issue, and then we'll be able to take some of those ideas forward. The Royal College of Anaesthetists has already agreed to support ideas with relation to anesthesiology, and we're looking for other people who back our more surgical, obstetric, or general ideas as well. There's some more information about that on our website, and there will be more coming on our Twitter feed. So this evening we're very lucky. We've got a team from London, our colleagues here. I apologise, I got my vanity. We've got a team from South Africa. We've got hello to the team in South Africa joining us for the first time. We've got a team from Dublin as well, and a team from Glasgow. So hello to everyone there. And then obviously we've got individuals joining us too. So I'll hand you over to Aneel. Very excited to hear from you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite tonight. It's a pleasure to be talking to all of you, and thank you for finding time in your evening. So I'm here. I'm a new consultant colorectal surgeon in Birmingham, and a new clinician scientist in global surgery. And I'm here with my colleague and friend. Are we still friends, Dmitri?
I'm not sure.
A tense day of research and meetings. And my friend Dmitri, who we're not in the same room, but who is also in Birmingham. And yeah, and we're here to talk about what is really the first part of the research that fits in within our broader vision of what global surgery is. So Dimitri's going to run through some slides in a moment, but really there are just 2 key points about this work that I would like to just discuss, and it's food for thought. And I think firstly that this specific project we're talking about, how many people die after surgery, this is an issue that affects us all. And for anyone who looks after patients and has been involved in the care of the post-operative patient that hasn't gone to plan, which is most of us, you will understand where I'm coming from, because the death, especially the death of a patient 30 days after surgery, even if expected, is still a deeply unpleasant experience for everyone involved. So that is an issue that affects me, you, and every surgeon and every patient undergoing surgery around the world. So this particular piece of work is not just an issue for our colleagues and patients in low middle income countries. This is really an issue for all of us, is the first point I'd like to make. And the second point I'd like to make is that this is we consider this to be quite a patient-focused project. This is about making things better for patients. The two things this is not about. This is not about hiding behind the fact, well, they were going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter. I do philosophically think we could be better for our patients than that. And there are different views on death in the 30 days after surgery, ranging from it is expected in some patients, it's unavoidable, we shouldn't worry about it, all the way through to the other end of the spectrum, which is death 30 days after surgery is a total failure for the patient, the surgeon, and the system. And you will all sit at different parts of that spectrum. There's no right or wrong with that spectrum, but I think it's important that we talk about it. And what this isn't definitely about is blaming surgeons. This isn't about saying surgeons are at fault. This group of surgeons have the biggest mortality rate. They need to do something. Like I said, if you begin to find yourself thinking about that or begin to discuss it, the way to get out of it is to pull ourselves back to remember that this is about making it better for patients, both in your hospitals and around the world. So I'll hand over to Dmitri. Dmitri?
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining this evening. So let's see if I can share my PowerPoint with you. Can everyone see that? Or?
Yep.
I can see that.
Okay. Is everyone happy with Sarah with the PowerPoint? Yep, perfect. Okay. So feel free to ask questions as we go along, if you have, or I'm sure we can discuss at the end as well. So there is just a brief presentation to just describe what we did and a few pointers for discussion, I think. So I think the first starting point really is where this whole research theme has emerged from. We're lucky to be funded, as Aneel has mentioned, by the National Institute for Health Research in the UK to undertake global surgery research around the world. And one of the things we do is hold annual research prioritization workshops with our collaborators to identify what are the most important research questions to address to improve patient care around the world. And in Johannesburg in November 2017, we all got together, and that's surgeons from probably around 30 different countries, and I think Janet, who's on the line, was there. And we prioritised what we thought were the top three priorities for our group going forward. Those were improving access to surgery, improving cancer surgery, improving perioperative care. And if anyone's interested, we published the sort of Delphi exercise in BGS a few months ago. So this work really fits in the improving perioperative care theme, understanding the current performance in terms of post-operative mortality and how that might be improved. So the aims of this study were to estimate the total number of post-operative deaths worldwide each year. And we also wanted to find out what was the proportion that occur in high-income countries and the proportion in low middle-income countries. And we know that at the moment there's a huge unmet need for surgery in low and middle income countries. So if this unmet need was met, what would happen to the numbers of deaths we expect? So those were our aims. So I'm sorry, this is a bit scary perhaps, but it's just a very simple equation to show how we've calculated these deaths. So we've calculated them separately in high income countries and in low middle income countries. The way we've done it is we've looked across 14 specialty areas to look at the number of operations done in high income countries in each of those 14 specialties. What proportion of patients die after surgery who have surgery from in high income countries? So it's relatively straightforward. And then we've added it together to have a total number of deaths in high income settings. And then similarly, in low middle income countries, we've looked at what is the total number of patients that have surgery in low middle income countries, what is the case mix in low middle income countries across those specialties, and the postoperative mortality rates for those specialties in LMICs. So I'll go through these one by one now. So the surgical volume figures you might be familiar with. We took them from Tom Weiser's 2012 publication in the WHO journal, and essentially they had observed data for surgical volume for 66 countries, and then they had to model it for the other countries. And they came to the total of 187 million operations being done each year in high income countries, 125 million being done in low middle income countries each year. So these are the baseline figures we've used for surgical volume. Updated figures were published in January in the EGS Global Surgery Edition, but we've done this work before that was published, so we've based it on the 2012 figures. And then case mix we have taken from two data sources. So firstly, in the UK, you might be familiar with hospital episode statistics. This is an administrative database that includes details on every single patient undergoing surgery in the National Health Service in England each year. So there's about 3 to 4 million operations included each year. It's really high quality data, it's real world, it's comprehensive from a universal healthcare system. So we've based case mix in high income countries on the case mix from England, from the HES database. It's a bit more difficult to find a high quality data source for low middle income countries case mix, because you need to identify a study that captured all surgery across all specialties. And there's not that many large, high quality multi-center studies that have done that. So the best study that there is the African Surgical Outcome Study that you might be familiar with, which was led by Chris Pickard from University of Cape Town. So I think I'm sure those of you that are online from South Africa know Bruce Pickard. And the ASOS study captured prospective data across 25 African countries. So that's a map of the countries that are included. So the database the ASOS data is very representative of Africa. And we've taken that to represent low middle income countries. Of course, there's a big assumption there that case mix in Africa reflects case mix across low middle income countries. But we thought this was the best data available. So this chart just shows the case mix we identified from the HES data for high income countries, that's in blue, and from ASOS for low middle income countries, which is in red. And you can see the major difference is that in low middle income countries, there is a lot more obstetric surgery being performed than in high income countries by a long way. The other group, which there's a lot less of in low middle income countries, probably includes various specialist surgeries. So that's again why the case mix is quite different across settings. So then the next item of data we needed was the 30-day mortality rate for each specialty. In 2010, the NHS published a linked database between the Hospital Episode Statistics and the Office of National Statistics. So you can identify what the mortality rate is for each procedure done in the NHS. And so we've used that as our baseline mortality rates. Overall mortality rate in the whole data set from 2010, which was the most recent data available at the time, was 1.1%, with a denominator of 3.4 million cases. So it's a large data set. And again, this chart shows the mortality rates by specialty. So as you'd expect, the mortality rates are much higher after thoracic and vascular and upper gastrointestinal surgery than they are after what we would generally consider to be lower risk surgeries like breast surgery and obstetric cesarean sections. But there's a wide variety of rates across specialty. The challenge we have is trying to identify what are the rates of postoperative mortality across low and low-income countries. We know from our global surge work, so this is taken from the Global Surge 1 study, that when you look across the world, mortality tends to increase with in middle and low-income countries compared to high-income country settings, and even after you risk adjust. So we try to look at a few different data sets to identify what the best way of converting the NHS high income baseline mortality rates to what might be the mortality rates in low and middle income countries would be. So we looked at the Global Surge 1 and the Global Surge 2 studies. Sorry, the second row down should say Global Surge 2. And both those studies identified that mortality rates were much higher in low and middle income than high income countries by a factor of approximately 1.5 to 2. However, those studies only included data from patients having gastrointestinal surgery. So we weren't sure how representative that would be of patients having other types of surgery. So what we ended up choosing to do on Janet's advice was that there was a systematic review in the Lancet a few years ago, which did look across all types of surgery at early postoperative mortality. The rates there are very low, in part because it's looking across a very wide range of surgeries, including both low and high risk surgeries, and also because they were mostly looking at 24-hour mortality. However, we thought it was quite reassuring that it was actually very similar to the global surge data, showing roughly a twofold difference. So we've taken the relative risk from the Bainbridge study for mortality in low, middle versus high income countries, which is, as you can see at the top, 2.14. So the final thing we needed to, sort of raw data we needed to find was what the unmet need for surgery worldwide is. And as you all know, sure, 4.8 billion people worldwide lack access to timely, affordable, safe surgery. And there's estimates from John Rose and Tom Weiser from a few years ago that translates to around 143 million operations that should be done every year in low and middle-income countries that don't get done. So this is the figure we've used to model what would happen if we address the unmet need for surgery. And so these are the final results. So just to recap, we've taken the number of operations in total done in high and in low middle-income country settings. We've taken the case mix from both types of settings, and then we've applied the per specialty mortality rates to each setting to the case mix. And we've summed that all up to get these total figures. So at the top you can see that if we look at what was going on at present, we think there's roughly 2 million post-operative deaths within 30 days of surgery, both in low middle income settings and in high income settings, with slightly more in low middle income settings. However, if we were to increase surgery in low middle income settings to address that unmet need for surgery, the numbers of deaths would significantly increase by 1.9 million in those settings. We would expect to see around 4 million deaths in low middle income settings. But we thought this was actually quite important because we passionately believe, all of us, Aneel, Janet, and the rest of our collaborators, that we need to increase access to surgery. However, what this data suggests is that unless those efforts to increase access go in tandem with efforts to improve the perioperative safety around the world, there is a risk that we will end up with very large numbers of perioperative deaths. That perhaps, if we invested in improving service delivery, invest in research to find better care for patients, we could perhaps avoid some of those deaths. And the figure at the moment, at the bottom, were looking at what would happen if we use different baseline rates for mortality. So the NSCIP database is from the United States, and the mortality rates in that database are broadly similar to the NHS. So the numbers of deaths are broadly similar as well. However, some of you might know about the European Surgical Outcome Study, which was led by Rupert Pierce across around 500 hospitals in Europe, probably now 8 years ago or so. And they had a much higher baseline mortality rate of around 4% compared to the 1.1% we used based on NHS. So if you use that much higher baseline mortality rate, you would end up with very large numbers of in your modelled estimates of postoperative deaths. We think that's probably an exaggeration. We don't think there's really 50 million people dying. And I think it does sort of indicate that the figure that we came to of 4.2 million worldwide is probably a reasonable figure. So the final thing we did was we wanted to contextualize the numbers of deaths within 30 days of surgery against the other top 10 categories of death. The reason being that I suppose you can say to someone that 4.2 million people die after surgery each year, but what does that actually mean? So this chart, as I'm sure you know, proved to be quite controversial. But really, it was to show what the comparison is. We're not exactly saying that 7.7% of people dying after surgery each year, or 7.7% of deaths are related to surgery. But it was a rough comparison. But it's clear that many more people die in the postoperative period than die following infection with tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV. And of course, these are the key infectious diseases that a great deal of money has been spent on in recent years. I think just to finish off, really, to highlight, as Aneel says, this really is about advocating for better care for patients by investing in surgical services around the world, increasing access, and in research. I think the infectious diseases colleagues have demonstrated that with concerted effort, you can achieve huge reductions in mortality. So the fact that deaths from TB, malaria, and HIV are fewer than in the postoperative period reflects really a huge success of developing anti-HIV drugs, reducing HIV transmission and AIDS mortality over the last decade. It's been a huge success, and I think we can replicate that in surgery as well. If we work globally together towards that end. So this is our visual abstract, just to sum up. So there's 4.2 million deaths we estimate within 30 days of surgery. We think that ranks somewhere roughly third when you look at categories of death worldwide, more than HIV, malaria, and TB. And unless we make concerted efforts to improve perioperative care globally, as the unmet need for surgery is addressed, total deaths will continue to increase to 6.1 million. So just to finish off, really, although it's Aneel, myself, and Janet are online today, of course, all of this work has had input and support from our collaborators from around the world, and sort of greatly indebted to their support and guidance to making sure that we address the right questions that will hopefully support patient care around the world. So, so thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to discussing this further with you today.
Okay. Everyone hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much, Dmitri and Aneel, for that. I think what we'll do is we'll start going around the different centres, just asking if anyone's got any questions for either of you, or if Janet is still with us, if she wants to weigh in on that as well. So starting off as we're here, do you have any questions for the authors on the paper? I mean, I've got one question for you guys. Thank you so much, obviously, for presenting. You mentioned about the so obviously your figures, they've been extrapolated, they're estimates using a mathematical equation. And I know they did similar things when they did the Lancet Commission. They then looked at disease-specific case studies to prove their estimates, to see whether or not they were accurate, you know, on a small scale, to prove the calculations overall. Is that something that you did, or that you think needs to be done, or is the calculation enough to stimulate the thought that we need to do these two things hand in hand, and increase our surgical capacity and increase our safety at the same time?
Shall I tell you one for start, Dmitri, then you can add in and correct me for all the fact check me as we go. So I think it's a good point. How accurate are our figures? If one looks at the maternal mortality figures, which are provided for the same range of countries, they are also estimates, but they are based on a foundation of better data. So most countries submit some form of data, and then they use that to scale it up. Whereas if you look at the way we've done it and what's available in terms of total post-operative mortality in low-middle countries, the data's just not there to truly validate what we've done and build what I call better model. This model is based on data at the bottom, as Dmitri described. So you've got the global surge, and you've got the ASOS data, and we've scaled that up. But that still doesn't have the breadth. So actually, I think the solution to this, and this is what we're thinking about and talking about, and we'd be delighted to hear from everyone today as future collaborators, is that we need to go out into the world and do a snapshot study. And that is in your hospital for a whole day, or maybe a whole week. We capture every single operative case that is done, and we measure the mortality from that case. And if we do that in a set week across 1,000 hospitals around the world, that's big, that's ambitious. But if we manage to do that, we'll really have the breadth of data that means that we can then scale more accurately. And then it will be taken more seriously. And the whole concept of surgery is behind infant mortality and maternal mortality, as we know. But actually, by improving the quality of what we're doing, we will be higher up in that scale. So I'm proposing that we look into this and look to do something to solve that specific problem in 2020.
I think that's brilliant, Aneel. And I know that you were highlighting, or one of the key things for reading the paper that you were highlighting, was the need that these things go hand in hand. I thought it once again highlighted the fact that we need to do the research. I mean, research might not be seen as the most exciting thing you can do in an LMIC, but actually it's so fundamental. We need to have this data collected so that we know where we're starting off from. I like your idea about having it across 1,000 hospitals for a week. That's a really interesting proposal. I've not heard anyone talk about that before.
Dmitri, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and I'm sure somebody will pick up on, is apart from the limited data we have, we don't know how representative that data is of all settings that do surgery in the world. So, for example, in our global search studies, we're not entirely sure how representative that data is of the countries that data has come from. It might be principally coming from the big teaching hospitals that tend to get involved in research. So, what we're sort of contemplating, and of course we welcome your feedback, is whether doing something very, very simple, very streamlined data collection for a short period of time would be much more inclusive and allow far more surgeons around the world to get involved, so that the data we have available is that bit more generalizable than what we already have. I think it's all about how can we support people to participate, and probably short, simple data collection bursts are going to be most effective.
I think that sounds like a fantastic idea, much more achievable than a long-term study. Getting buy-in from someone for a week to gather all the data is much more likely than, doing a sort of 6-month study in one place. Have you thought at all about the implementation of that? Like how you would recruit people to do that?
I think that would require a big collaborative effort across all the existing stakeholders, if you like, in global surgery. So obviously we already have a pool of collaborators within the Global Surgery Collaborative, but I think we'd be very keen to reach out to other groups, GASOC obviously, Incision, the ASOS group.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Anyone else who's really interested, and making this a big community effort really to collect data. Because I think if we work together, we will achieve something much better than if we stay in our little silos. So we'd be very keen to discuss and take that forward, if you're interested, of course. And of course, your feedback on how we can maximise the quality.
So, Katrin, have you got a comment to return on that one?
Yeah, so it's more of a question and a comment in a way. So I really think your paper's brilliant and it's going to places that people have never been before. But the main thing I read, the main question that came to my mind reading this paper was not how accurate are the numbers, because they seem like something that we all know to be instinctively true, that people don't do as well in more middle-income countries, and we all need to improve perioperative care. But it's, why do these people die? What is it in there? Because I found it interesting that part of the analysis, or part of your discussion, was that this paper suggests that we shouldn't raise ahead in increasing access to surgery without also focusing on, quality of care. Obviously, that's a sensible recommendation. But I also thought reading people, part of the deaths could have been caused by poor access to surgery because the patients were already arriving much later, much sicker because of access problems. So how do you think, so from my point of view, I think it's a more meaningful research question to ask is, why are people dying? Because increasing the accuracy of how we calculate post-operative deaths is great, but it's not going to get us any closer to working out how to stop it happening.
Can I take that to start, Dmitri?
Yeah, of course.
So, Katrin, I think that's a very, you've summarised some very complicated issues very elegantly and succinctly. I don't think I could have done that. So, it's a very good question. I think you've rightly highlighted the interplay between access to surgery and outcome. You can't have one without the other, which is what you said, that if you have safe surgery operating on only a few people, you're not serving the community. if you open your door to everyone, it's going to be, you're going to get a big range of things coming through the door, especially if those people are taking time to get to your door. And so it's not as simple. I don't think you can do one without the other. That's the first point. As access increases, quality has to come alongside. Otherwise, you risk doing more harm than good. The second question, which is actually the harder one, is the why are people dying? And this goes back to that there was a lot of interest in well, are we just identifying a figure that can never be changed? Or are some of these deaths preventable? And we didn't drill down into things like specialty and timing of surgery. And I think that is something that we would look to correct in the next body of work, which will probably come before the sort of the big global study that we've described. I push a little bit further there, and you know, the final part of what I say there is that to really understand why people have died, you need to look at detail. In the UK, we have NCPOD, so this is a confidential inquiry into post-operative death. Several reviewers look at a series of cases where death has occurred and they judge whether it would have been preventable along the way. Equally, in community care for non-surgical topics, that sometimes, and even surgical topics, people have used verbal autopsy. So they go into communities, they speak to people, and they begin to establish the domains of why people have died. So, for example, if you can begin to establish whether someone had a lump in their groin, it became tender, they were vomiting, they died. And begin to assign causality there. The actual assigning causality is very hard, and that takes you into a more detailed body of work. And I suspect, looking at everyone here, one day someone will take this on as a PhD and look really into why people are dying after surgery. And the question, what's preventable in that death? I think of all those millions of deaths, some of them are preventable. I can't prove that, but I've got no doubt. And so my view is that even reducing those deaths by a small percentage would be a worthwhile thing to do for patients. Dmitri, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you ask how can we do better research that addresses what patients need, I think the two things go together. Improving the estimates of post-operative mortality necessarily requires us to get much more granular data, which will start to answer some of the questions about why people die. How many of these deaths are after elective emergency cases? How many of them occur by specialty? And even in what countries do they occur? Because at the moment we're looking at deaths in high income and low middle income countries. Well, there's a huge range of countries in the low middle income country bracket, if you like. Huge range of different surgical settings. So I think getting much more detailed data will help answer some of those questions at a macro level, begin to answer them. But as Aneel said, I think there's also much more detailed work to be done at a much higher level, looking at individual patient cases and what we can learn from those. So I think there's different approaches to answering these questions, and they need to go together to kind of really to strengthen each other. I think they will add value, understanding both at the macro level and the micro level why patients die. So I think that there's a lot of work to do, and it's going to need a lot of enthusiastic, bright researchers to take it on across the world. So, lots of opportunities, I think, to really make a meaningful contribution.
Thanks, Dmitri and Aneel. We've got a question. Our group in Rwanda, unfortunately, have been unable to join on BlueJeans, but they have managed to join on YouTube. So I've got a question from them that I'll relay. From Joseph, who's one of our anaesthetic colleagues there. It's quite a big question. So the question is, I think you may have answered that slightly about further research, but how do you differentiate deaths due to surgery and deaths due to anesthesia or other causes? But the second question / statement is, we're trying our best in LMICs to increase resources, but when you see all the numbers, it looks impossible, as LMICs have other priorities, such as food, education, and security. How can we do all this? The phrasing is, how can we do all this tougher with surgery? I think it means how can we get surgery through while all this is going on? It's a pretty massive question. Any response from yourselves?
Dmitri, do you want to take the first question and I'll take the second question?
So in terms of how can we look at deaths, whether they're caused by the surgical intervention or by the anaesthesia, I think that is going to be very difficult to answer at this sort of global level. I suspect that is a sort of detail that will come out in a very detailed individual patient case note review type exercise, which perhaps needs to be done at a global level. But I think we all know that when patients die, it's multifactorial. It's very rarely going to be a single factor that contributed to that death. We've already discussed access to surgery. This is a huge issue in many parts of the world. The intraoperative care is also important, but so is the postoperative care. So I think that there are multiple factors that contribute, and I don't think there's going to be a single solution to solving this problem. I think we're going to need to identify many different interventions and initiatives to achieve improvements, sustained improvements in therapeutic mortality. But I think there is encouraging precedents. So some of you might have seen the paper in the British Journal of Surgery a few weeks ago looking at perioperative mortality in Scotland over the last 15 years or so. And they have achieved a 37% decrease in their perioperative mortality over around 10 to 15 years. There probably hasn't been a single intervention that led to that, but it does show that by sustained focus, investment, and leadership, which is really important, I think we can achieve significant improvements internationally, but it's not going to be a simple thing. Quite different, perhaps, to treating malaria in that sense. Patients with malaria, you just need to give them the anti-malarials, perhaps try and reduce transmission. I think this is much more complex in surgery.
Thank you. Aneel, did you have a response to the rest of the question?
And so the second question is another good question, and it's a big question, and I'm sure I will answer it inadequately. But there are two things to get across. Firstly, as surgery develops over the next 20 years, it isn't just a case of, as we've said, access or quality, but there are three key domains I think we will address. One is capacity of surgery, one is quality of surgery, and one is innovation of surgery. I think anywhere in the world, the type of surgery you are doing now is not the type of surgery you will be doing in 10 years and 20 years. No matter where you are, things are going to change and things are going to innovate. Addressing the capacity of surgery, which is what we're really getting to, is a difficult one. As some of the global populations are due to double in certain countries, how do we ensure that there are enough surgeons and hospitals to provide the operations needed? That is a challenge. I think that as a group of surgeons, we will have to look at ourselves and our countries and how we are trained and figure out if everyone needs to be trained to do complex surgery, or if we can train some people faster to do routine hernia repairs and routine appendectomies, for example. And that will free up fully trained surgeons to make decisions and deal with complexity. But bearing in mind, in most settings, it takes at least 10 years to train a surgeon to become an independent decision maker. That's a long time. So that's one aspect where we address capacity. I think the second aspect, which is easy to say but hard to do, is the concept of leadership. I mean, you are the future leaders, and that question that's come from Rwanda shows that you are thinking about it into the future. And I think that the patients need you to lead that charge across capacity, quality, and innovation. And it's easy to say, become a leader. And like I said, it is hard because it becomes a lifetime job to lead that charge in what seemed to be insurmountable challenges. But one to improve this capacity of surgery, one does have to start. But I think unless we are leaders in surgery, no one else is going to do this for our patients. No one else sitting in government or sitting in finance is going to highlight the importance of surgery to our patients unless the surgeon is the first advocate for the patient.
Thank you, Neil. I think you bring up a really good point about advocacy there and the huge role that has in the future of global surgery. The other question I was going to ask, or comment I was going to pose to you guys, was you brought up about how going forward we need to be advocates. You brought that up in your presentation, and you compared it to malaria and infectious diseases, but we've always had an issue with people's appreciation of surgery as being an equal issue to infectious diseases. And how do you envisage us changing this or going about this? I mean, yes, I completely agree that surgeons should be the first advocate, or anaesthetists, as an anaesthetist. But there's people whose entire careers are about advocacy, and surely we should be engaging them, educating them, getting people who've been trained specifically in advocacy to take this forward to start off with, because it's a skill set that we don't have. Although we advocate for the individual, we don't necessarily advocate for a specific issue. And should we not be engaging advocates and saying these are the numbers, we can bring them to you, we can bring the expertise to you, but you guys show us how we get more people involved?
Yeah, let me start, Dmitri. I'll keep it brief, and then you come in. So, again, as we go forward, the concept of advocacy and higher level policy working, it will change. At the moment, we work through our colleges and we work through organisations, and there's a lot of strength working within an organisation. If you can speak with the voice of an organisation, you are stronger than speaking on your own. And I think that will always be there. And quite rightly, so we do need to engage with our organisations. However, I can see that becoming a more disruptive process. I can see it becoming a younger process. I can see it becoming faster. So I'm very happy to see new groups set up. I think these groups need to be able to work with the existing associations. And one of the ways to learn how to do it is to go out and do it. And I think you'll find there is a warm reception. So within our unit, we have a policy consortium within our global surgery unit, and that consortium unit is to translate research into policy and clinical practice. And that works with the organisations. However, looking over the next 5 years, we're looking to set up some form of parallel organisation, which is full of younger people who can be mentored by these. I'll be careful what I say, but by these slightly more experienced surgeons. And I think by doing that, we will begin to transform this concept of advocacy and policy change. Dmitri, can you improve that?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think.
yes, you can.
Well, I think if you look at the energy of the medical students and the decision, I think it's really inspiring to see how there's a real global movement, I think, for improving access and quality of surgery. And that's really fantastic to see. And I think those individuals, some of whom are online today, will be the leaders of the future. I think necessarily in the past, infectious disease has been the highest priority because that was the greatest burden of disease in many settings. But now that we're seeing, as countries develop economically, as populations go into urban areas, and there's an epidemiological transition that we all know about, And I think there will be a recognition that surgery will be much higher prioritized more highly, because it, as the burden of cancer, for example, this surgery is the key treatment for cancer. It is the key treatment for many diseases of older age. So I think the leaders are coming through, and I think the mindsets of government policymakers will change as they see that the world is changing around. You know, that doesn't mean that we should take away from infectious disease. I strongly don't think that I don't think it should be a zero-sum game that you do one or the other. I think we need to learn from the successes of not just infectious disease, but maternal health as well, who have made huge improvements in maternal care over the last 20, 30 years. So we need to learn from their successes and start to replicate them. I think that, you know, working as a global community, that is achievable.
Thank you, guys. I think South Africa, our group in Cape Town, have got some questions. Priyanka?
Hi everyone. I think we have an echo.
Yeah.
So we have two questions from our medical students.
Okay. Yeah, if you type them, I can read them out for you. Or if anyone's got a headset with a microphone on it, if you try speaking into that, that might make it better.
Is this better now?
Yeah, perfect. Well done.
Oh, great. So we have two questions from our medical students here who are with us at GCT. The first one is pertaining particularly to obstetric care in low and middle income countries and obstetric mortality. So the question was, there appears, so the study showed there are significant obstetric procedures being done in low middle income countries. We found that there's quite high mortality in low middle income countries relating to obstetric care. So we were wondering whether the future studies will be addressing this specifically pertaining to obstetric care in low middle income countries. And then the second question was, considering that a large number of simpler but life-saving surgeries, for example, obstetric emergencies, do not require ICU care and thus have better outcomes and also more commonly performed in low middle income countries, how was this controlled for? For example, how might this have skewed data in favor of low middle income countries and thus masked through perioperative risk in low middle income countries?
Dmitri, do you want to take that one?
I'll take the first question. So thank you very much for the question. I think you're getting at a really important point, that in this first attempt, we have assumed that the difference between rates in high and low middle income countries are the same across all specialties. We've just multiplied up every high income country specialty mortality rate by 2.14. But you're absolutely right that Bruce Bickard, who again is from UCT, published a really important paper a couple of months ago, where he showed that the difference between high and low middle income country mortality rates after cesarean section is not twofold, but I think it was 50-fold. There's a huge difference. So it is possible that we have significantly underestimated mortality in some procedures, where actually the disparities between the two settings are much greater than what we have anticipated. And this is why, going back to our suggestion of doing a snapshot study in the future, collecting more high quality data will really help to address some of these shortcomings in our current study. one of the difficulties when you're combining different data sources from different data sets is that they've all been collected using slightly different methodologies, slightly different definitions, inclusion criteria, and it becomes quite difficult to compare them. So collecting data internationally, globally, using the same study protocol at the same time together will really aid making meaningful comparisons across the world. Because we'll be a bit more confident to know that those are real differences rather than differences in how the data was collected. So thank you for your question. You've really highlighted the one of the major shortcomings in our study, but we hope that we can try to address that in the future.
Thanks, guys. Does that answer both your questions from the Cape Town team? Or do you have any more for us there? Oh, sorry, I've muted you. I do apologise. Hang on a second. Yep.
No, that's okay.
But maybe Aneel, do you have anything to add?
Both my questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank
No,
you.
I think that was a good summary.
Great. What about our colleagues in Dublin? Do you guys have any questions for us?
I don't think we have any extra questions. It was a very good paper, but yeah, obviously the kind of causes and stuff like that need their study in that. Thanks, Mia.
That's great. And we're really lucky enough to have Janet Martin on the line. I wonder if I could ask you, was there anything you wanted to, as one of the other co-authors, sorry to put you on the spot, but it's so exciting to have you here. Is there anything you want to add to the discussion or any other points you want to bring out?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can all hear you. Yeah, no, that's great.
Great. Yeah. So, first of all, thanks to Dmitri and Neil for a really wonderful summary and for doing a lot of the work behind this paper. I just want to reflect on some of the questions that have been asked here because they really have been brilliant questions. In terms of advocacy, I feel that is an important part of our responsibility. And this particular paper actually provides one of the most useful tools for advocates of improving knowledge of the global death toll due to postoperative mortality. And before we actually set out on this journey, and this is just really step one of multiple steps that we have planned in order to inform what is the global death toll due to postoperative mortality. But before we did this paper, we really had no idea what is the absolute number of people dying around the world. And at least now we have, a ballpark estimate. There's limitations, and we hope to address them in the future. But for advocacy now, it's so much easier for us to raise the fact that we think that there are as many as 4.2 million people dying after surgery. And that death toll being greater than HIV, malaria, TB combined, really places the idea that we need to better prioritize funding and focus and attention on surgery. Because most of that focus has been, as we've discussed, on the big three infectious diseases. And most of the global funds have gone there. So we really now have something, a soundbite which is useful. And I know there's so much difficulty in using sound bites, especially when we want to be entirely evidence-based and objective. But as researchers and as clinicians, we need to actually be able to have sound bites that capture our policymakers and our funders' attention very quickly. And this is the closest thing that we have to an evidence-based sound bite. The other thing that I was reflecting on is the fact that this estimate of postoperative mortality rate being 4.2 million, to the best of our knowledge, seeing it in the context of other global burdens of disease, cause death, I think, has been helpful as well. Yep, fraught with methodologic issues, but at least people can kind of get a sense as how big is that number. And then I want to reflect on a question that Joseph asked, which I also thought is a really good one, and I think that our colleagues from perhaps Dublin had already also inferred this. The question being, why do people die? So I know that Bruce Bykard wrote a really a good blog that's worth reading on the World Bank website. And it is entitled exactly that, where he said, why do people die after surgery? And he explained what they could know from the ASOS study, reasons for death, and also just placing clinical context on that. But I want to also bring back some evidence around Joseph's question around and what proportion of these deaths are due to anesthesia-related causes of mortality. One of the pieces of evidence that we use to inform the relative risk of mortality in this Lancet research letter was the Bainbridge meta-analysis on postoperative mortality, which was published in Lancet in 2012. And Bainbridge and myself and two other colleagues here, we actually took a look in that same paper at the trends over time of postoperative mortality rates. And we found that over the last 50 years, those rates have precipitously declined in high-income countries, but in low-middle income countries, they've actually increased over the last couple of decades. And so we dug a little deeper and we tried to answer with what the data provides from these studies, and again, methodologic issues all in. But what we did find is when we divided out the anesthesia-related mortality from the overall postoperative mortality, the anesthesia-related mortality was more clearly of a disparity between the low and the middle income countries and high income countries, whereby in the high income countries, the anesthesia related deaths was really precipitously coming down over the last 5 decades, but in low and middle income settings, actually increasing. And so we took it one step further and we said, well, maybe that's because, the risk, the case mix and the risk at baseline is different. So when we adjusted, when we took a look at the baseline ASA scores, it was interesting because in high income settings, patient risk at baseline is actually increasing in the last 5 decades, but the postoperative mortality rates are decreasing, and the anesthesia-related mortality rates are decreasing. But in low and middle income settings, it was opposite. The ASA scores were pretty flat or not increasing necessarily, but again, the mortality rates were increasing. So I just would summarize that by saying, we know that it is possible to reduce postoperative mortality rates, and we know that has been possible in the high income settings, despite the fact that we have higher risk patients presenting for surgery increasingly over time. And so if that is possible in the high income countries, we think it's possible too in low and middle income countries. And a talk that I did at the Royal Society of Medicine just a few weeks ago talked about that disparity and that inequity as a tension now. It's a tension that we really need to join up with our global colleagues in order to reduce that disparity and that inequity in post-op mortality rates. Because I think it's really unfair for us to ignore that is happening, and we know that our global colleagues around the world are absolutely capable too, but have not necessarily been given the same resources that we've been having the great benefit of having in the high income settings over the last 5 decades. So those were just some of my thoughts. I do have others, but I'm going to stop there. And thanks, Joseph, for those questions.
Thank you so much, Janet. Before we go around and check if anyone else has got any other comments to come back with, I'd just like to reflect, I'm another anaesthetist, so it's lovely to speak to an anaesthetist about global surgery. Sometimes we are a bit of a minority. But yeah, I just want to echo a little, as you were saying to Joseph, Joseph's question. The work I've done in low resource settings, I've always been utterly astounded by the commitment and capability of my anaesthetic colleagues. The majority of whom I've worked with have not been physician anaesthetists. They've been non-physician anaesthetists. And the work they do based on the training that they have and the kit they have is amazing. But I just so agree with your point that it's all about engagement with our colleagues over there and finding out what can best benefit them, not necessarily what we want to teach them. Because I started my global surgery journey being given going out on short lecture trips, being given a list of topics to prepare, going out and doing them. And I just found that unsatisfying at the end of the day. Although the feedback I always got was very positive, it was probably politely positive. And when I did my longer times, my longer attachments, it took the first kind of few weeks for that politeness to wear off and for people to tell me what they actually wanted. And I just think engagement and long-term links with people out there to learn what would actually truly benefit people on the ground is such an important way forward, so that what we're providing is matching need rather than what we believe should be given out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I fully agree with you, and to that point, I think that the ASOS 2 study being about providing and finding African relevant, contextually relevant solutions for problems is brilliant, right? And it is all about that collaborative approach. And exactly, with Global Surge and your group too, it's about finding that contextually relevant approach to solutions which may not look the same in every country.
Thank you very much, Jen. So I'll just go around the different sites we've got. Do you guys have any other comments or questions? What about Glasgow? You guys got any comments or questions there?
We're fine. Thank you for it.
No worries. Popping back to Cape Town. Anyone there? And see, but not here.
It's been a fantastic journal club.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you very much. Very pleased to facilitate. Dublin, any questions from yourself, Sarah?
Well, we were just kind of going through kind of things that we thought might kind of be causes worth investigating of the mortality and stuff like that. So one thing we thought of as well as the kind of anaesthetic stuff might be access to blood. Might be worth looking into.
Yeah, very good point.
From obstetrics anyway. It's a big perioperative requirement that a lot of our ladies have. Also the safety profile of the safe blood patients, etc., which is very heavily monitored here, but and obviously emergency settings it can be very difficult to ensure the best of times with the much more resources.
No, excellent point. Thank you, and thank you for having. So pleased to have obstetricians with us as well. That's brilliant. Thank you. I don't know if we've got any more individuals on the line there. If I'll just unmute. If any of them have any questions or comments that they want to make. No, everyone's being very quiet and just observing. I'm afraid our colleagues in Rwanda are about 10 minutes behind us on the presentation. But when you guys catch up with this, if you do have any questions, Joseph has my number, so he can text me and I will. I'm sure that our colleagues who did the presentation would be happy to follow up with anything that you have to ask there. Is that Alain Masso? Hi. Hello, sir. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm fine.
Good. Thanks for
Hopefully you
joining.
can hear me very well.
Yeah, we can. Perfect. Are there any comments or questions you have to bring up?
Actually, I would like to ask two questions. I've been trying to catch up with your presentation at the moment. I've heard one of the doctors speaking about the training of surgeons that required three main things like capacity, quality, and intervention. My question was mostly about the capacity, I think, because you see that the training of surgeons can differ between different countries most of the time. We try to harmonize it by when you see foreign doctors, African doctors, for example, trying to go abroad, they always need to harmonize their credentials somehow when they want to go for a postgraduate training to show that they have the basic knowledge. They need to show that they have the enough credits, they need to know their basic knowledge, etc. So they can work in foreign countries. But sometimes you can see that the training is not always affordable for all of the surgeons. So they need to find opportunities abroad, but they can't necessarily create the opportunities in their own original country. Here I'm taking the example of African doctors. So how do you make, can you create more surgeons in your own country, but with more affordable studies?
I'll take that one. That's okay. No, it's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for your question. And it's a good one. How do we increase capacity of surgeons without it taking a decade? And even if you start now and it takes a decade, in a decade you'll only have one cohort, you'll have to wait 12 years, 15 years. Well, 3 points. Firstly, each region or each country needs its own bespoke plan. And I think there is a role for schools of surgery here to take the lead. So schools of surgery that can create bespoke plans to address the needs. Because one plan doesn't fit all. If you know, I was to sit here and make a plan for country X and expect everyone else to follow, it won't work. Number two, I think you're right, it not only takes time to train surgeons, it is expensive. And I think my point was that not everyone needs to be trained to deal with this end of the spectrum where all the complexity and decision making is. I think there's this end of the spectrum where the routine surgical services are: hernia repair, straightforward appendectomy, admitting patients. And actually, you don't need to train for 10 to 15 years and go abroad to deal with all that routine service. So there is a role to train people over much shorter time frames, much lower cost, to fulfill the immediate. So you could train someone to repair hernias competently, non-obstructive, non-strangulated, elective hernias in a relatively short time period. And that will free up your surgeons, and that will free up, allow the surgeons who are trained to come out and deal with all the complexity that needs to be dealt with. And finally, the cost of surgical training. It is expensive, and I think you are, what I've said is nice, but in reality, people do need to go and get exams, and they need to go and get qualifications to prove this. I think the GASOC group are doing a really good job with the regional approach to exams. So you no longer have to fly into London and take an expensive fellowship exam 2 or 3 times. That is done within the remit of the GASOC group. And I think that's quite a futuristic model to gaining postgraduate qualifications. But if leaders are to set up schools of surgery, I can see a lot of the training going back in-house, along with trusted partners. But let me stop there.
Thanks very much, Aneel, and thank you, Elaine. Elaine, sorry, just remind me where you're calling from.
Myself?
Yes.
Yeah, Rwanda.
Rwanda. Oh, fantastic.
You're asking about the country.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, Rwanda, fantastic. I was just going to mention again, I don't know if you've heard about the the NSOPs, the National Surgical Obstetric Anesthetic Plans. It came out of the Lancet Commission, and then I think it was the WHO, correctly, that spoke about them. Janet, you probably know that. It was great. The WHO suggested each country creates their own national strategic plan for surgery. And I know that one of my colleagues in Oxford is involved in, I think, Nigeria, helping them to develop their plan. And if it's something you feel passionate about, I know Joseph is currently setting up a GASOC Rwanda group. And if it's something you feel passionate about, I would say speak to him, and I'm sure they are always happy for people to get involved to help doing some of the legwork for these sort of plans, because it's you guys who have the answers. You may not know it yet, but it's the people on the ground doing the work who have the answers that need to feed it back to the ministries rather than them coming up with top-down ideas. So, link up. I'm sure you probably know Joseph anyway, but link up with Joseph, and when you've established your GASOC group, you can go to them and say, we've got the manpower and hopefully women power here to help them do their work. If anyone, sorry, Janet, go for it. Yeah.
Yep, just one comment on that. There is in Rwanda, there is a NSOP group that is in progress.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and it's progressing well. And so, I think that they are making ways for people to be able to, especially those within surgery and anesthesia, to be able to, and obstetrics, be able to contribute to that. So, Alan, certainly that would be something that would be wonderful to get involved in, because that sets the stage for that training. Are you on Twitter or email? Because I can send you some information around that. The NSOAP. It might be easier for me just to email you. Is that okay?
I think there's a chat on this call. You could always pop it in the chat on this call.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Sarah has my email, so she can give it to you and give me that.
Perfect.
Will do. I'll send that on. I'll just make a note so I don't forget.
Okay.
Thank you very much, guys. That's amazing connections, Janet. Thank you so much. If nobody has any other comments, it's 9:20 here, and the South Africa guys are even further ahead, and the Rwanda team are. So I think if no one else has got any comments, we'll draw this to a close now. Thank you so much to everyone, especially the ones with the time difference, for making your evening, making yourselves available, coming along and contributing to what was a great discussion. We are actually, I just mentioned again, we've got another journal club next month in June on the 27th, where our colleague Soha Shobi will be presenting her Lancet paper about maternal mortality. So the Dublin obstetric guys may be interested in that one. Brilliant, thank you. The other thing to mention is our conference is coming up on September the 14th this year. It's specifically looking about how technology can provide solutions in global surgery, an area where sub-consultants, which we're very passionate about in GASOC, can get involved. There will be lectures in the morning, and then there will be a hackathon where you can all present your potential solutions to a global surgery issue. I know the Royal College of Anaesthetists has agreed to take forward some of the anaesthetic ideas that come out of that, and I'm currently talking to obstetrics and surgery to see if we can get groups to take those forward too. And for anyone who wants to attend the University of Oxford Global Surgery course, which is a week-long course looking at the theory and background knowledge for global surgical engagement. It's a week-long course. It's a credit-bearing short course, so it will count towards a master's in the future. The bursary application deadline for that is the 15th of May. Joseph went on it last year, which is how I know him. And I know he got an enormous amount out of it. So look out for the bursaries, look at the bursary application there, because I know people learn a lot of that. So thank you so much, everyone. Anyone who's got any follow-up things from this or wants to make any connections can email me, and I will field them out from the GASOC email address. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. It was really
Thanks,
great to
guys.
chat.
Oh,
Thank
please,
you.
you've got something out of it. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, it was good.
I'm pleased you enjoyed it. I'm very glad. Let me hang up on this. Yeah, no, that was good, I think.
Yes, very good.
It's always difficult to tell, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No, that's perfect.
So you
I'm
will
sorry
add
I've been
us
on
to
so
the
late.
list.